Góðan daginn. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Icelandic for Foreigners. In this video, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to adjectives in Icelandic. Now, I'm not going to go super in-depth in this video about what an adjective is. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube that could fill you in if you're not sure, but the short definition is that an adjective is used to describe a noun. The Icelandic word for adjective is lýsingarorð. Now, adjectives in Icelandic are very complicated. They must match or agree with the noun that they are describing in 4 different ways. They must match in gender, in case, in number, and in definiteness. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about that for the sake of this video. I'll be making other videos in the future that deal with each of those aspects, but for this video, we're going to keep it really simple. So in this video, we're going to learn to say the following. I am blank using an adjective. He is, she is, and it is. That means that we're going to learn the adjectives in their masculine, feminine, and neuter forms, but only for the nominative case. If you're not sure what that means, I recommend you go and watch my video about Icelandic cases. But basically, that means that we're only going to be talking about adjectives that are describing the subject of the sentence. Basically, these examples that you see on the screen right now. So let's talk first about the dictionary form, which is the masculine form. Now, the form that you'll find in an Icelandic dictionary is the masculine singular form of the adjective. It will most often have one of the following endings: a UR, LL, NN, R, INN, or ASUR. Here are some examples of words that end that way. I'm going to leave off the endings INN and ASUR for now because I'm going to get to them later in the slideshow. But here are examples of each of those other types. So we have gullur with the UR ending, heill with the double L, grænn with the double N, and blár with the R. Now the dictionary form, or the masculine form, can be used to say I am blank if it's a male person speaking, or he is blank. So you can say ég gullur, I am yellow, ég heill, I am in one piece, ég grænn, I am green, or ég blár, I am blue. You could also use it with hann gullur, hann heill, hann grænn, or hann blár. Now let's talk about the feminine form. This is created by removing the masculine ending. Now I've underlined the endings for each of these adjectives. So for the UR words, the ending is the UR. So gullur becomes gull. Now for the double L endings, the masculine ending is the second L. So heill becomes heil. We lose the double L sound and we also lengthen that vowel. Heill becomes heil. For the word grænn, the second N is the masculine ending, so it becomes græn. There again, we lose the voiceless N at the end, and we also lengthen the vowel. If you're confused about this, I recommend going and checking out my pronunciation video on the letter N. And for the last one, blár, the R is the masculine ending, so it becomes blá. The patterns that you see on this slide hold true for most adjectives in Icelandic. Now, the feminine form can be used to say I am blank if it is a female speaking. You can also use it to say she is blank. This is the form that you would use. So you could say ég gull, ég heil, ég græn, ég blá, or hún gull, hún heil, hún græn, hún blá. Now let's talk about the last gender, the neuter form. For this one, we're going to add the neuter ending to the feminine form. Now, the neuter ending is almost always a T. So gull becomes gullt. Heil becomes heilt. Græn becomes grænt. And blá becomes blátt. Now, the reason we're going to add 2 T's to the end of blátt is because the neuter form, you always have to have at least 2 consonants at the end of the word. And so it's not enough to just add a single T, you have to add 2. Also, pay careful attention to the change in pronunciation that the T may cause, like in the word heilt, we have the voiceless L. If you're confused about that, go check out my pronunciation video on the letter L. Same with græn becoming grænt. We get a voiceless N before the T, so watch out for that. Now, the neuter form can be used mainly to say it is, það so we would say það gult, it is yellow. It's a very general statement about what the speaker is seeing. You can also say það heilt, it is all in one piece. Það grænt, it is green. Það blátt, it is blue. Now, those are the general patterns for the most common types of Icelandic adjectives. I'd like to now go over a couple special rules. The first is what's called the feminine umlaut. This is something that happens to the feminine form when we have an A in the stem of the adjective. So the word latur is the masculine form, it means lazy. We would expect the feminine form to be lat, lat, but that's not correct. Whenever you have a single A left over in the feminine form, it changes to an So lat would become lut, that's the feminine form. Svalur, that means cool, as in temperature. We're not going to say sval, we're going to say svöl. Gladur means happy, but we won't say hún glad, we're going to say hún glöð. And svangur, which means hungry, we wouldn't say hún svang, we would say hún svöng. I know this is a weird rule, but for some reason in the feminine form, the A doesn't like to be by itself, so it changes to an This doesn't, however, affect the neuter form when you add the neuter endings. Also be careful, because a word like fatlegur, where it has two syllables in the root, it just becomes fatleg. We don't have to change the A in that case, because it's not in the syllable right before the ending. The next special rule is for neuter endings. So I'd like to look at a couple examples. In the first example, latur, meaning lazy, the stem already ends in a T, which means we need to add another T. So I mentioned this in a slide earlier that the neuter ending always has to end in at least two consonants. So you can't just have a single T at the end, so it would become lat with two T's. Now let's look at the next one, rauður. Now you would think that we would take off the stem to make it feminine and then add the T and it would become rauðt. But for some reason, eth and T can't go next to each other, so the eth changes into another T, so we have rautt. A similar thing happens in the next example, vontur, which means nasty. Now, instead of having a DT ending, the D is going to drop out, and we're going to have vont without the D. D and T can't really go together in Icelandic. And the next one, with the word frir, which means free or uninhibited, we wouldn't just have a single T at the end, frit. We have to have the double T, frit. All right, the next special rule is for adjectives ending in aður. This is a completely different class of adjectives that are derived from verbs, but they're still pretty simple once you learn the pattern. So here are some examples. You have the masculine form is sivjaður, and then this is slightly abnormal, but the feminine form is sivjuð, and the neuter form is sivjað. So just look out for those endings. It's always the same, aður, and then uð and að. The same rule for blessaður is the masculine form, becomes blessuð, the feminine form, and blessað, the neuter form. All right, the next rule is for adjectives that end in inn. This is also a separate class of adjectives, but it's a pretty straightforward rule. The inn form is the masculine form, which becomes in feminine and ieth in neuter. So fyndin with two n's is the masculine form, fyndin with one n is the feminine form, and fyndið is the neuter form. Same with skilin becomes skilið. So watch out for adjectives that have this inn ending because they behave a little bit differently than other adjectives. All right, the last rule that I'd like to talk about is there are some strange adjectives. They're not very common, but there's always a possibility that an adjective is going to be strange in the way that it inflects. So I'd like to give you a couple of the most common ones, but you always have to be on the lookout. One of the most common is góður, which means good. Becomes góð in feminine, which is expected, but then becomes gott in the neuter form. It loses the accent over the O. The next example, sannur, which means true, becomes sun in feminine, which is what we would expect to see, but then becomes satt in the neuter form, and the ends drop out. The next one, gamall, means old. Feminine form is gömul. Now this looks a lot like the feminine umlaut that we saw, but it's a little bit trickier. And then the neuter form, gamalt. And this last one, dapur, which means sad, becomes döpur in the feminine form because the UR is actually part of the root in this case. That just happens sometimes. It's not very often though. And the neuter form is dapurt. If you're ever not sure about an adjective and how it changes, then just go ahead and look at the website bin. This is a website that I mentioned in one of my other videos, which is a great resource for looking up the different forms of any Icelandic word. So always be on the lookout that an adjective might be irregular and you might need to look up the different forms if you're not sure. All right, that's all I have today. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll see you soon. Bless, bless.